Now you've had an opportunity to learn more about Intro to Centers, and Thinking and Feedback. These are three key components to the curriculum that often follow each other right in order. Typically in the morning of your schedule, you'll implement a read aloud, which we'll discuss in detail later, followed by Intro to Centers, and wrapped up with Thinking and Feedback. In the next video, you'll hear more from Jessie Carlson and Morgan Gallagher, and they'll go into greater detail about read-alouds. You'll notice that we read a book more than once. In fact, we read it up to 4 times over the course of a unit. The reasons for this are rooted in research that shows strong evidence of high-quality comprehension and vocabulary skills, which is developed through multiple story reads. Each reading is a little different on purpose, and it aims to focus on different details of the characters, the plot, vocabulary, and comprehension.
With Read Aloud. My name is Jessie Carlson, and I've been working for the district for the last 3 years in the pre-K program. Previous to that, I taught private pre-K, and then have spent several years in the early childhood field. So just a little bit of background. For the read aloud component, reading, as you know, reading to children is a fundamental early childhood practice. In pre-K for me, what we read and how we read is based on research and intentionally supports vocabulary development and comprehension. Our core texts are chosen for their complex plots, interesting characters, and challenging vocabulary. These core texts anchor the other components in the curriculum, so they're spoken about within, as well as put on display or accessible to students. And it enhances their interest, their comprehension, and vocabulary development and learning experiences throughout the day. With that being said, one thing to keep in mind with the core text is to have multiple copies of your core read aloud. That allows you to have a teacher copy. Sometimes I put sticky notes in my teacher copy so that I remember to mention a vocabulary word or a comprehension aside. And then it allows an additional copy to be placed within the center. So as I said, for my first pilot year, what I did was I went through the lessons and then put sticky notes within the book just to remind me of what I wanted to say so that I didn't forget. And that allowed me to move through easily without looking at the scripted prompt. The lesson plan is very scripted, but do not feel like you need to read it word for word. It's more of a guide for you to use. As far as scheduling read aloud into your daily routine, you want to keep in mind that.
Do you want that?
Not yet.
Okay, I didn't say.
You want to keep in mind that the information that you're using during read aloud is then worked into your center. So you want to complete read aloud before you're in your daily schedule. Okay, so like Jessie's, I'm Morgan Gallagher. I teach pre-K at Waterboro. Pretty much it. No, I have most of my experience within working with pre-K age or preschool age children with disabilities, specifically autism. So I worked at Spurwington Therapeutic Preschool for quite a few years. And then I started working at Waterboro and was waiting for my dream job to come up, and it did. So that worked out. So anyway, so with your read alouds, you're going to read them each 4 times. And you're going to be doing something different each time you read your story. Try Baby is from the first, it's like one of the first reads that we do. Yeah. It's the very first that we read. Mm-hmm. And I know Melissa has already talked about Cry Baby a little bit. There we go. Okay, so the first read is really about the orientation, introducing the plot of the story, the story problem if there's a story problem, the characters. This is online. This is from our guided documents, but I'll just read it to you. Teachers introduce the story problem and main characters using the illustrations from the book cover. Being careful to not give away the plot. While reading the story, teachers support vocabulary by using expression, pointing, and gesturing. Teachers will support understanding by using comprehension asides, and we'll talk about those. So, I'm going to use your marker.
It should
Just go over one. There we go. Okay. I'm really sorry that I'm doing this after lunch and can't bring lunch now, and you guys might be a little bit tired, but we'll get it. Okay, so before the first read, you're going to choose, it says 5 to 10 vocabulary words. Especially in the beginning of the year, you're going to want it to be around 5, maybe even less, especially for your first read, because as Jessie will tell you during our second read, we really get more into a deeper understanding and get more into the vocabulary. So choose 5 to 10 vocabulary words to enhance and choose your strategy to do so. So pointing, gesturing, or voice expression. Short definitions can be used only on words that can't be defined by the other strategies. So before I started reading Crybaby, I went through and I noticed that on one of the pages, it said she woke the old retriever when she cried. Well, I know that they're talking about the dog, but the kids might not know that. So I just lightly underlined retriever. So when it comes to that point, I'll say a retriever is a type of dog, and I'll point to him. For other definitions, most of them in the story, especially, you can use a gesture. We get to, I think, where they talk about the neighbors, and I would just say a neighbor is a person who lives close by to you. But you definitely will want to go through your story ahead of time and pick out which words you really want to focus on. All right, research shows that children will remember the first definition they hear for a word. For this reason, we do not ask children what a word means. Instead, we provide the correct definition for them. That's super important. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Comprehension asides are teacher comments throughout the story to explain an illustration. The characters' emotional states indicate what a character may or may not know. Comprehension asides should be mostly about the main character or characters in the first read. Model analytical thinking when appropriate. For example, I'm thinking. So there is a part in this story actually where there are no words on this page or on these pages. So this might be a part where you would stop and think or say out loud, I'm thinking that all of these different people are trying to figure out ways to help the baby, and I see a confused look on the baby's face. And I'm wondering if he's thinking, why are they all doing this? And then after the first read, ask inferential questions about something that is not specifically stated in the text to deepen understanding of the story. Answering these types of questions will help explain the character's emotions, actions, and or motivations, and then model appropriate analytical thinking if children do not respond. So this is the script that Jessie was talking about. This is online on the website. So if you want to find that, I do suggest that you bookmark the website on your laptop because you will be using it a lot. I like to just print off my script and keep it right in the book with me. It'll have all 4 reads right on this version. Yeah. So I just will have them all stapled together and flip. I didn't staple these ones, but everyone does it a little bit. Yes, exactly. Because Jessie, I put them on in plastic sleeves. Yep. And then you can pull them out. Yeah. So you can do it any way you want. You don't have to print anything out if you don't want to. You can just go right by the computer and use your laptop if you need to. But your questions, there are questions at the end of each script for each different read aloud. So for example, I'm going to show you the reading aloud. All right, so the script is on here. You can follow it. You do not, we don't want you to sit there and read it like a robot to the students, which I know you wouldn't anyway. I, for the first year especially, kept this with me all the time, and I went by what they said. I just kind of tried to say it like in a conversational way. So that's kind of what I'll do today. All right, so if I were going to be doing a read aloud during a typical year at school, I'd be sitting in a small chair in front of my group, which would be in our block area. I use sit spots with their names on them, so they all know where they're going to go sit. This year, you might want to have everybody sitting like spread out at tables, and you would be standing in front of the room because you want to make sure that everybody sees you, obviously, and sees the book. This is one of the easiest things to carry over for if you're doing remote learning, because obviously you can read it during, like if you're doing a Zoom meeting, this is an easy way to, or one of the easiest parts of the curriculum.
We also did lots of recordings, and we use Seesaw for our online platform, and then we could post a recording and include the discussion questions and students to respond individually.
Okay, so like I said, normally I would be sitting in front of my group. And I would start by saying, so we have a new story to read today. The title of this story is Crybaby. The author, or the person who wrote the words, is Karen Beaumont. And the illustrator, or the person who made the pictures, is Eugene Yelchin. So on the cover of this story, you see a dog. His name is Roy, and Baby. And throughout this story, Baby keeps waking up in the middle of the night, and everybody tries to help Baby go back to sleep, but nobody can do it. So let's read and find out who was able to help Baby and how they end up doing that. In a quiet house on a quiet street. And notice I said quiet, quietly. That's one of my ways of defining that word. A not so quiet baby cried. Woo! She woke Roy, the old retriever, a retriever is the name of a dog, or a type of dog, when she cried. In no time, that big dog was by her side. Bark, bark. She woke her mother and her father when she cried. Father, hurry to the baby, rush, rush. Mother tried to quiet the baby, hush, hush, rush, rush. But the more they tried, the more that baby cried. Wah. Bark, bark. No, Roy, down, boy. Baby doesn't want that toy. She woke her brother and her sister when she cried. Brother tickled baby's tummy. Peekaboo. Sister changed the baby's diaper. Pee-you. Peekaboo. Hush, hush. Rush, rush. But the more they tried, the more that baby cried. Wah. Bark, bark. No, Roy, down, boy. Baby doesn't want that toy. She woke her grandma and her grandpa when she cried. Grandma tried to feed the baby. Slurp, slurp. Grandpa tried to burp the baby. Burp, burp. Slurp, slurp. Pee-you. Peekaboo. Hush, hush. Rush, rush. But the more they tried, the more that baby cried. Wah. Bark, bark. No, Roy, down, boy. Baby doesn't want that toy. She woke the sleepy next door neighbors when she cried. So your neighbors are the people that live close to you. They came in their pajamas. Knock, knock. The neighbors rocked the baby. Rock, rock. Knock, knock. Burp, burp. Slurp, slurp. Pee-you. Peekaboo. Hush, hush. Rush, rush. But the more they tried, the more that baby sighed. Wah. Bark, bark. No, boy. Down, boy. Baby doesn't want that toy. And I see Boy's face, and he looks a little sad and upset. I'm thinking he might be upset because he thinks baby wants the toy. And then again, you could explain what you're thinking on that page. Still, that old retriever wouldn't leave her side. No, Roy, down, boy. Baby reaches for the toy, a white and woolly little sheep. Baby smiles, then falls asleep. Quiet baby, what a joy. And that means that baby's sleeping. Good night, baby. Good night, Roy. So then this is when you're going to start your questions. So the questions, like I said, are at the end of your script. So the first question here is, I would say to them, I have a question, and I want you to think about it first. So before you raise your hand, I want you to listen to the whole question and have an answer in your head. Then you can raise your hand. So, why do you think that baby stopped crying when Roy gave her that white and woolly little sheep? Then you would wait for answers. If you don't get any answers, which does happen sometimes, I give them some time to wait. And you might even think you're waiting too long, but they're still processing their thoughts, and that's okay. Give them a lot of time to think about it. Sometimes I even repeat the question again. And then, if I still don't have an answer, I would then say, well, I really think that Roy knew that the toy made the baby happy, and that she needed the baby to go to sleep, or he needed the toy to go to sleep, and that's why Roy gave her the toy. And then if you have time, there's a second question that you can ask as well. I will say that this is a super important time for your ed tech or your assistant or the other adult in the room. During the read alouds, they should be sitting or be amongst the children so that you can really focus on your read aloud. They could be modeling appropriate behavior.
Sometimes mine takes anecdotal notes, so I just have a sheet that has all my students' names and then a box next to their names. So if they're asking questions or answering questions, and she can just quickly write that in.
Yep. Any questions about the first read aloud?
It's not specifically about the read aloud,
But the question from the chat room from Hannah is, are there online translated options for the read aloud books to enhance ELL students' understanding?
What?
Sorry, it's the mask in my voice. Are there online translated options for the read aloud books for ELL students?
Is that a question for you?
So there's not that are specific to the curriculum. I mean, the DOE website uses Google Translator. I'd be curious, I know there's lots of folks from Portland they have responded to this in some way. I'd be curious what their answer would be. But as far as like the lesson plans that you have access to online are all in English. They're not translated in any other language. But certainly if you have access to a translator within your school or through your district, then I would absolutely, ask them about how this could be enhanced or what you could say or do to accommodate that for that student and their family. But I don't want to call out on Portland, but if there's any ideas that they have, I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And if they don't answer it right this minute, we can tell.
Okay. All right. Jesse's going to do the second read.
All right. So the second read is just the deeper vocabulary. So you're again reading the entire text a second time, and you're reinforcing what children already know and extending their knowledge of vocabulary and fun, as well as character development.
So the focus is on further clarifying points of confusion. So you'll be adding more information to students' responses when necessary. You'll continue to define vocabulary words. So maybe in the first read where you're doing more gestures or tone of voice, this is a time where you can really add a more lengthy definition. And then always refer back to the illustration. So even when you're asking those guided questions at the end, going back to the illustration to where Roy is trying to give baby the sheep, if that's the question you're talking about. You can explain further feelings or thoughts of secondary characters. Let's look back to where the neighbors are coming over. Sorry. Okay, here they are. So you can point out, you've already defined that neighbors are people that live close by, but you could point out in this illustration that maybe the illustrator used this dark blue color so that you realize that it's really late at night when they're walking across the street. Look, they even have to use a flashlight to see where they're going. So you can continue to model that analytical thinking. And after reading, we use follow-up questions to guide children's responses by using the text and illustrations, as I said, in order to help connect the events in the story. So maybe, for instance, with the word bully, just talk about how that means really stop. And then, as we explained earlier, a lot of these vocabulary words are used then throughout the other centers. So after reading the story, one center is talking about toys and making toys and using different materials and textures. So that's pretty, it's pretty basic, just going back through, elaborating more on definitions, adding more explaining thoughts and feelings of characters and that analytical thinking.
Okay, so the third read is Reconstruction. This one is super fun, and I love this one. Your level of participation is going to vary, so expect that. But so it's interactive. In the third read, children will help retell and reconstruct the story with you. The goal of the third read is to enrich children's comprehension of the story, continue to model and engage in analytical talk, and introduce or reinforce vocabulary. All right, so introduce the story by stating that you have already read this story and wait for responses on the title of the book instead of providing it. So this time I would say, we have read this story 2 times before, and then a lot of times you'll just have them jump right in and say, it's crybaby. Let the children know that you will be retelling the story together, and this time they call out to provide information about the story. Before reading the story, choose parts of the story you want to read. During this reading, the teacher is responsive to comments and questions. Use phrases such as, we remember, or we know what's happening here, while pointing to the illustrations. Continue to define words as necessary. Because there is a lot of discussion and explanation throughout this read, there may not be time for inferential questioning at the end of the story. If you do have time for a question, consider a question that will link 2 stories together. Okay, so when I do this read with my students, I start out by really going over the expectations and letting them know that this is a different type of different time that we're going to read the story when we all work together to tell the story. For some of the stories, you don't even have to choose parts that you're going to read because they are going to love the story and they're going to want to tell the whole thing, which is okay. Usually I start out by reading the first page or 2 at least to kind of reorient everybody to the story, and then we jump in from there. But I would say to them, this is the time that you guys get to help me read the story together or tell the story together. You don't have to raise your hand this time. You can tell what's happening on the page.
It takes them a little while to get that no hand raising protocol down because they're used to that in so many other scenarios within the classroom. So just being really clear about the expectation of one person speaks, and just being mindful that if you've already spoken, maybe on the next page you keep your voice quiet so that another friend gets a chance to say what they think is going on.
You definitely will have some students who will want to tell the whole thing and not let their friends get a word in. So it is important that you let them know that. Like, I'll tell them, if you notice that you're the only one talking, then when I turn the page, wait for a minute and give your friends a chance to tell the story as well. A lot of them will want to, they just want to talk, which is okay, but they're going to say the exact same thing that somebody else just said before them. So I like to remind them too, if you heard somebody say something that you were going to say, it's okay. You don't have to say it again, but you might get a turn to talk on the next page. You're also going to get kids who are going to want to just tell the whole story right away. So I tell them, only tell me what's happening on this page, because they know that we're going to be going through the whole thing, and then they'll get a chance to tell you what's happening later on. We have three. You'll get to a part where there's a lull and maybe people don't remember what happened. We do have some stories towards the end of the year that get kind of lengthy. So if nobody is telling me what's happening, and if I've already used the, oh, we remember here that boy is barking, or you can just say we remember, and then that might trigger somebody to say, oh, I remember what Roy was doing. Or you could say, oh, we know that they're telling Roy that he doesn't want that toy. And then also there are parts that you're just going to want to read to kind of jog their memory, and then you can turn the page and see what's happening on the next page.
This story is really great to start out with because you can be so animated with the hush, hush, rush, rush, and then by the time they get to that third read, they are on it. They know this whole story. I wish I had a video I would remember to do this year.
And they'll do emotions with you.
Yeah, by the second read, they're sort of doing it with you, and then by the third read, they've really got it.
Yeah, this is a favorite story. They love this one, which is awesome because it's a really great story to start off the curriculum with. All right, and then the fourth read.
All right, so the fourth read is even lesser of a read because they are acting out the story. So for this read, children dramatize different points of the plot as characters or inanimate objects in the story. They demonstrate their comprehension of the story by using dialogue and gestures that the characters would use. You can make the decision based on the length of the story, whether you want to act out the entire story or choose a scene or two from the story to act out. One way that I do this is, for instance, in Cry Baby, I would start by saying, okay, in the story, one of our characters is Baby. Who would like to be Baby while we act out this story? And I use sticky notes sometimes, and we'll just write Baby and then label the child so that when we're trying to orient ourselves of who's doing what, I'm not like, okay, who's Baby again? And of course they would forget too. So the sticky notes is a great visual as a teacher to remember who is who. And then we would just go through and somebody could be Roy, somebody could be the woolly lamb. And I don't have the students acting out Crybaby, but in another unit, we read the story Rabbits and Raindrops. That's our unit, yeah, unit 3. So I do have a video of the students acting out that story. You won't see the part where I assign roles. So I've already assigned the roles. Students are sort of standing where they need to be to act out the story, and you'll tell that they're really familiar with the story. The story is short enough that they act out the whole thing. And I just sort of read through and the students act it out and check that out.
Yeah, I know. I had the lights off in my classroom when I took this video, but.
A little bit better.
Mother rabbit sits by her nest under a hedge at the end of the green lawn. Her 5 babies are ready to climb out of the nest for the first time. Mother rabbit hops out into the bright sunlight. Onto the green grass. One after another, all 5 of the baby rabbits hop out onto the lawn. They nibble clover and blossoms and leaves. They meet grasshoppers, spiders, and bees. All of a sudden, the sky turns dark and big, heavy raindrops begin to fall. A rabbit's fur is not waterproof. Baby rabbits can become soaked and catch cold, so Mother Rabbit hurries her babies back under the hedge. From their dry shelter, 5 babies watch the pouring rain. A butterfly flies in her hedge and rests on a dry leaf. Soon others come inside. I see a hummingbird go inside. Who's a hummingbird? Joe! Oh, right. You already snuck it. Out in the shower, honeybees buzz by. Flying between raindrops to stay dry. Suddenly the shower ends. The last few raindrops splatter down on the back of the turtle. Colton, can you make your turtle? There you go. All together, the rabbits pop out onto the lawn to taste the wet grass and play rabbit tag in the sun. Go ahead, guys. And you guys can make your rainbows. Nice. All right, good job, everybody. So for this story, I was able to incorporate a role for every student. In other stories, there might only be a handful of students with roles, and then you'll talk about having an audience. So that the rest of the group will sort of push to the back of the room and be part of the audience. And you can talk about sort of the norms of being an audience.
There will be different ways that you can assign your actors, and it's really just dependent on your class and what works best for your class. The first year that we did this, I had popsicle sticks with everybody's name written on them, and I had a to-do cup and an all-done cup. And it depended on how many characters there were in the story, and I would just pick out a name. If they said that they wanted to do it, then they would come up and they would be that character. If they said that they didn't want to, then their name went into the all-done, and that was their chance for that time. And then when that cup was empty, then we just put all the popsicle sticks back in the cup and we started over.
A checklist is another way to do it, just checking off who's had a turn during the story arc.
This year, I definitely could not do the popsicle sticks in the cups. I had a couple of students who couldn't handle the unknown, and they wanted to have their turn every time. If they didn't get a turn, it was very upsetting to them. So I had to have 4 actors every time. So even if there were only 2 characters in the story, then I would have to have 2 people be the characters for the first part of the story, and then 2 people be the characters for the end of the story. And everybody knew during this story, these 4 people will be the actors, and the next story, these 4 people will be the actors. And that's what worked for this year. So it's really going to depend on your class. Yep. You'll also get actors who really want to do it and they really want to act, but then once they get up there, they freeze, which is okay. I actually had a read came to do an observation when we were doing Remove Their Shadow, and I said, I don't know if we can act out this story. Like, how can you be a shadow? How can you act out a shadow? And she said, just give her time to act. So we did it. It was like one of the best stories that they had acted all year. But that was also a time where one of my little girls really wanted to be part of the story acting. And then she froze and she didn't want to do anything. So I said, are you sure? I gave her another chance. Are you sure you want to do this? And she said, yep. But then when it came time for her to do something, she just we then kind of solicited the advice from the rest of the class, and I said, if you were going to be a shadow, if you were acting like a shadow, what would you do? And one of them said, go fall to the ground because that shadow's on the ground. So then she took the advice from peers and fell down to the ground, and then she did a great job for the rest of the story. So you can definitely give them a little help if they need it. Some won't need help at all. But set your expectations up also at the beginning before you do your read. No?
There wasn't any dialogue in the video, but obviously in other stories, the characters would be acting out that dialogue. So you read it, or if they are, sometimes they already know it, and they'll just say it as you're at that point. But sometimes you'll say it, and then the actor will then repeat it as.
Do you guys have any questions about read aloud?
4 times? You really gonna read the same book 4 times? Don't they get so bored with it?
Can you repeat that for the?
So, Mrs. Smith would like to know 4 times, isn't that a lot to engage with one story? And it's not, because every time you're reading it, you're deepening their understanding and their comprehension of the story, as well as reiterating new vocabulary to them that you'll then see them use throughout the day at other centers. And
You're not reading it 4 days in a row.
right, it's also not 4 days in a row. So you'll do a first read of Crybaby, and then you'll do a first read of Peter's Chair, and then you'll do a second read of Crybaby, and that's all worked into your weekly webs that are available in the curriculum online.
As they become more familiar with it, they will access that book in the classroom library and retell the story themselves. And it's so fun to watch. They are so excited to be able to open that book and read it because they know the story so well and on such a deep level.
And like we said, you're not just reading it 4 times. They're doing something different each time. And they really look forward to it. Like when I sit down and say, this is the time that you guys get to tell the story with me, they get super excited. Or if we say, you guys get to act out the story, it really makes them.
They actually get to the point when they're asking, when are we going to read Crybaby again?
Yeah.
It's very engaging for them with the 4 different reads.
And I just wish I could bottle you, because your process and what you do with kids and how you respond to problem solving could be used at any grade level. And I have K-12, well, pre-K-12 now, but it's just so refreshing to hear what you do. And I just thank you for using examples of your real life, because then it becomes real for people instead of a textbook thing like you have to do.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate, I'm like sitting here going, yeah, every 4th grade could be doing that as well.
We think about that too, about
We
how.
forget those things, like it doesn't change when they leave pre-K.
Right.
It needs to continue to go.
The foundational skills can use that.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I just wanted to share that. I really appreciate that.
Well, we definitely love what we do. Any more questions about read aloud?
I did have a couple of comments from the chat room. We were talking about ELL families and students. Sue shared that they sometimes make time for a book preview. Sorry. They make time for a book preview with a student, with somebody who speaks the same home language, and revisit that at a later time. And her also thoughts, which I completely agree with, all of the strategies for supporting comprehension and vocabulary that we are using in this curriculum and in the all curriculum suggest what they're suggesting is incredibly important and helpful for students, both English speaking students, because they're learning these new vocabulary, they're learning the, I can't think of the word that I want, but the, you're like, hush, and you're, showing them what the word
The
is, that sort of thing,
gestures,
and the gestures, and just giving explanation for vocabulary is incredibly important for, 4-year-olds who haven't had that experience, and also English language learning students. There's another comment I wanted to read. Sending home books so that older children and parents can read with the child before, sort of like a pre-teaching of the book. Showing additional pictures and examples of animals or objects so the children can understand what the story is talking about before they're seeing it.
On the website, there are sample parent letters, or they are on there?
Yeah.
Okay. The curriculum does have sample parent letters for each unit, which I sent out previous 2 units. I just changed a couple things to make it more specific to my classroom. But and that includes a visual image of the cover of the core read aloud text, the essential questions that we're exploring, and maybe some vocab or details about what's going on in the classroom, so that parents sort of have that window of opportunity if they would like to incorporate any conversations at home.
And I know we mentioned this before, but you'll definitely want multiple copies of each book. You might want to keep one just for teachers. Like I said, I had mine underlined. Jessie puts post-its, or we used to put post-its in hers. Sarah had mentioned how you would want to put some in your centers. Like I noticed when I was reading Crybaby, I had some paint splatters on there because it was set up next to the art center because they were painting, making paintings inspired by Crybaby. So
they were using the yellow and the blue and the orange for illustrations.
Yeah. So you'll definitely want at least 2 copies for each read aloud.
And just again, you want read aloud to take place before your intro to centers, because if you're introing taking care of babies, you're relying heavily on information that they've heard in this story about what is something.
I don't do read aloud before my intro, but I know that it ties into intro, so I make sure if I know that the activities in intro tie back to Crybaby, I'll make sure I read Crybaby the day before and starting that new unit.
So either the day before or before intro to centers on that day. All right. So as we talked about the 4th read being acting out the story. Let's see. Because it's screen sharing. There is another component of the curriculum that is storytelling and story acting that is separate from read aloud. Oh, sorry, we didn't do transition.
Oh, yes.
Transitions from read aloud are found in those scripted lesson plans for each read, and they support literacy and language skills. And as I said, they're in the teaching manual for each read aloud. And they become increasingly more challenging as the year progresses. So at the beginning of the year, they might be transitioning by the color of their clothes. So if you're wearing the color blue, like you see on the cover of the book Crybaby, you may go wash your hands for lunch. And then maybe at the end of the year, they are transitioning by the syllables in their name or ending sounds in their name. So it progresses over the length of the year.
Sometimes too, like if I have my read aloud right before my intro to centers, I'm not really dismissing them anywhere. So you can keep that dismissal and use it somewhere else during your day. You don't have to do it right after that, but definitely look at them and use them because they are very beneficial. But you can choose when you use them during the day.
Okay, so back to storytelling and story acting. That's okay.
Question real quick. What part of the day are you generally doing your read alouds?
In the morning.
In the morning?
For me. In the morning. Our afternoon is pretty packed between lunch, rest time, special, usually, so in years past. So we typically do read aloud intro to centers and centers during that morning portion of our day. So storytelling and story acting may not happen at the start of the year. This is sort of an additional component. You want to start with the core components, you know, the read aloud, the centers. Many teachers or ed techs collect stories while students are sort of transitioning in. I know we have a little bit of downtime in the morning while students, my students come in and unpack their bags, and then they have a breakfast or a snack time. And then I have sort of just tabletop options out for them, not their daily centers, but just activities for them to do. That is the time that stories could be collected. You won't get a story from every student every day. A goal would be to get a couple every day, maybe 2 to 3 students. And students can share a story that you write on loose leaf paper. I keep just a composition notebook for each of my students and just add to it as time goes on. Melissa types hers, and then students add their illustration to that typed paper. So, I mean, 15 minutes would be ideal to get a few stories a day. You can prompt storytelling by asking a student what they did over the weekend, if they don't know what they want to tell you about, what's something that they really enjoy, what's their favorite thing to do at school, what hobbies or interests do they have. I always say, you can tell me about anything you want. And then I guide them by saying, then what happened? What did that look like? Who was with you? Did you say anything? Then what did he or she do? Just as story acting during the 4th read of Cortex, students will act out the short stories of their peers. So I choose a story or choose the student who will share, ask if they are comfortable having their peers act out their story, if they want to share it. And then I keep a checklist of who has shared to make sure that everybody has the opportunity if they would like to. I know sometimes students want to go on, and then this happened, and then we're doing this over here, and here's another story. So sometimes you can limit that by just saying, okay, when I get down here, we're going to stop your story for today, and you can tell me another story another time, just to allow, to allow yourself to work within those time constraints. I have a little story. You girls want to back? I have a story that a student shared with me. Let me read it to you. We were getting ready to come to school. It was me, Sissy, and Mom. Mom got in the car, and her window was down, and a bird flew into the car. Me and Aubriana screamed. The bird flew to the back of the car, so Mom ran out of the car, opened the trunk, but the bird didn't come out. It flew back to the front of the car and then flew out Mom's door. Mom got in, closed her door, back to the car, and then we came to school. So I happened to see, I always ask, is this a true story or is this make-believe? And then we talk about fiction and nonfiction later on. This was a true story. And the excitement and the exaggeration. I saw Mom at pickup later that week, and I said, you had quite an ordeal with that bird the other day. I said, oh, you didn't have a bird fly into your car on the way to school the other day? It was a make-believe story, but it's just fun. So if I were going to do this, I would read the story first and say, okay, so in the story, our characters are the students, Gracie. So who would like to be Gracie today? All right, Miss Brown, you're Gracie. There's your little post-it, Gracie. Sissy, and we found out her name is Aubriana. Would you like to be Aubriana? And I'll be Mom. So I'll be the bird. You want to be Mom? Okay. Sure. So then we have Mom. And we'll pretend that this area right here is
Can we come this way? Can we come this way more?
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Perfect.
Is the car. So we have Mom in the front of the car, and we have Gracie and Aubriana sitting in the car. And let's read through the story. So I'm going to play the teacher and the bird, unless anybody wants the bird. Okay. So we were getting ready to come to school. It was me, Sissy, Mom. Mom got in the car and her window was down. I should be over here.
And a bird flew in.
Me and my sister screamed.
Ah!
The bird flew to the back of the car. And Mom ran out and opened the trunk, and the bird flew back to the front of the car, and then flew out Mom's door. Oh, Mom got back into the car, and we came to school. And then the audience was laughed.
I just want to say that I do type the stories, but first I write them because when you're sitting with the child and they're telling you the story, you're, writing it out, you're showing them how to pinch the letters, and as you retell it with them, making sure you got all the details, they see the written word there. They can type them out. I don't think I typed them this year though. No?
Yeah.
I know it sounds really silly, but I can see a 4-year-old having a hard time telling.
Yeah.
Sure. And so, even something that really happened and that beginning, middle, and end, and that whole, how do you support that?
It
When
really,
the story doesn't make sense when it comes out of them, I don't know how a kid acts it out. It doesn't make sense. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Guys, they repeat the question.
Oh, so it was asked how you get a story out of a student, maybe at the beginning of the year.
When they have difficulty expressing.
Yeah, when they have a hard time
The stories are short.
expressing themselves.
They're usually
So-
1 or 2 sentences.
That's one of the reasons I like to keep them individually in a notebook, because then at conferences you can really show that progression. I also, so if a student tells me a story, it might be a couple sentences. Maybe I start with, what did you do this weekend? And they just give me 1 to 2 sentences. And I say, we draw a picture of that? We make an illustration for this story. And like I mentioned, just, did anybody say anything? Who was with you? Just using as many guiding questions as you can get to get more information from them. If it's 1 to 2 sentences at the beginning of the year, that's to be expected. As they become more comfortable, as they hear more stories from their peers, as they're acting things out, and with the support of you asking those guiding questions, it really will develop over the course of the year.
A lot of times you all use words like what happened next, what was the first thing that happened, what happened next, what was the last thing that happened, what happened at the end of the story, to kind of help them.
Then what did you do?
Also, if I have a kiddo who's really struggling and can't come, I don't have any ideas, I don't know any stories, I'll do something that I experienced with them. At Centers yesterday, I saw you building a block tower. Tell me how you did that, and then I can really support them because I know exactly that.
And then whether it's at that time or during Centers in the writing area, I allow them to add an illustration to their writing.
So this is a designated time, right? So, because I know sometimes when I'm doing lunch with them, stories really start coming and flowing from kids.
If
is
you're
that
sitting
a time-
with, yeah,
I
if you're,
usually sit with them
Yeah.
and kind of encourage them with the stories. Is that a time that I could write the stories as well, or is it more for?
I mean, if that's if they're sitting there just telling me stories, I wouldn't make it, okay, lunchtime is when you tell me the stories. But if they're just doing that naturally, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I think the idea there is that it's really about you, the teacher, joining the student in whatever it is they're doing, eating lunch, coming in for the day, during Centers, whatever it is. The set time would be, if you, especially in a full day program where it's probably more doable, where it said the 15 minutes to do storytelling, that would be the 15 minutes of acting out and doing it to the class. But the time that you're using to collect the story is totally sporadic. And you might realize, I haven't seen Jessie or talked to Jessie a little bit. Maybe I'll go hang out with her in the art center today and just have a conversation and take a story.
And last year in our classroom, whoever was my helper of the day, that was their day to tell a story if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And so after they ate breakfast, they would go to my assistant and tell their story. This year, I've done a little research on storytelling. I'm going to do it a little different. I'm going to make it part of Centers. And for a chunk of time during Centers, sit myself at a table and have a turn list, and anyone who wants to come tell me a story can do so.
that was my writing center for a day.
So it really depends what works for you in your schedule. It's not when we did the pilot, we didn't do this component right away. Right. We got everything else settled and then added this. Yep.
Any other questions?
And this story time is, for the 15 minutes of story time, is this every day or is this kind of like? No, so you won't act out a story every day. If we got to it once a week, I would have it.
Okay. Yeah, we do it like maybe during a transition, or we came back from specials and we had a time.
Or one day a week we didn't have specials, so that was sort of a short, we would use a short portion of that time to incorporate story acting.
I'm just curious if you ever use like classroom prompts to help children out of the voice, either when they were acting it out or telling. Like, I think in terms of like a special education set, it might be
Yeah,
really
I can
helpful
see
for
where
kids
that would help in some ways. But I think for this situation, we want them to sort of be verbalizing or using their bodies to act it out with less props. What do you think?
So yes, I agree with your answer there, Jessie. I also think if it's a really exciting story, like what you just did with the bird, and if other students are wanting to be part of that, like you could easily add like a scarf to dramatic plays for wings of a bird for the next day and encourage them, remember yesterday we read Sarah's story and the bird, this and that, you could recreate that. But as far as just doing, like this component itself is really exactly just about verbalizing a story, recognizing a beginning, middle, end, and then sort of taking on that responsibility as a character. Some students are going to run with it and love it, and other students are going to want one part of it, and that's fine. It's not like a make or break, everybody has to have a turn, or check the meetings out. It's really just more about, you're such a good storyteller, this and that. And then if we're noticing that a child in particular isn't participating, or this isn't really something that makes them comfortable, then just chatting with them over time, yesterday I sat with you, you told me a really great story about going down the slide in the park. Could I share that with your friends? And like you said, even if it's just a sentence or two, that's okay to start. But there's so much more to the curriculum where they are able to take on roles, act out characters, retell stories, that if this particular piece isn't being met verbatim, that's okay. Like I said, some students are going to love it and run with it, and others are going to need some more coaching.
They can even act out the crazy things. Like I remember the first training that we did for this, Jessie took a card, game story acting, and it was a story about a birthday cake. So Jessie was like the candles in the birthday cake, so she stood there like this. Looks like each other's candle. So they don't just have to act out, a person or an animal, they can act out anything.
Yeah. And this is like one of the few parts of the curriculum too that doesn't take a ton of planning on anybody's part. So to know what props you may even need could be hard. I could see if you had a nonverbal student in your classroom that had an aide or had a speech therapist, that hitting them up during that time would be huge for that student. And adding in some type of visual aid or some type of gesture to recreate a word.
Right, just so they can participate, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Skills using the props.
Yeah, you don't want to make it not participatory just because they don't have the verbal skills. So you could get creative there. But as far as like props when acting it out and things like that, I wouldn't get hung up on that, right?
I also want to say from the chat room, Danielle has a really great idea, but she says she loves to use rest time to talk to students that aren't sleeping, which is a great time to connect and collect stories.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion as well. All right, I think we're going to continue. I'm your
Maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, get them out from the outside.
Yeah.
And then we'll do some more.
I just did it for you. So like, so we are going to move on to. So before we were talking about how it's super important to give the children information or the definition of a word, because the first thing they hear is what they're going to know. So the first year that we did this, it was just football. We did numbers, but it wasn't added into the like the title. It was just songs, wordplay, and letters. And then last year we added numbers Turned out Swiplin, but we still all call it Swipple because that's the first thing that we knew.
But you say that to the kids.
Hey, listen, lady. You don't call this Swipple or Swiplin to the kids. I usually just, I don't have a name for this really during my schedule during the day. I just will say it's time for songs. It's time to group time to sing, play some games. So Swiplin, songs, wordplay, letters, and numbers. So this portion of your day will take about 10 to 15 minutes. Longer for Mrs. Gallagher, but I try to limit myself just because I get excited. It also depends on the time of the year. The goal of Swiplin is to learn and practice phonological awareness, letter names and sounds and rhyme, numbers and numeracy skills. Children will engage in singing songs, listening to and reciting poems, playing games, and listening to predictable texts. All right, I will tell you, this does take a lot of prep. So, especially in the beginning of the year, so before you start each week, you do want to review your Swiplin days 1 through 5 and look for materials that you will need to prepare. Materials will vary from week to week. Most materials you will need to prepare once, and then you'll be able to use them again and again throughout the year. So I'll show you some examples of what I have made. We sing Down by the Bay. So what I did was I just went on Google. Sorry if I copyright or unsold pictures.
Are you sorry though?
No. So we're down by the bay. We did Where the Watermelons Grow. Back to my home, I dare not go. Or if I do, my mother will say. So I just printed them off, laminated them, and then I glued them to some felt. You can use magnets or whatever you choose, whatever works best for you. And then I found little polka dot tail, a bear combing his hair, snake eating cake, moose kissing a goose, llama eating pajamas. You get it. So I went online, found the images, and then I made them for this song. Like I said, it takes a lot of prep. So make sure that before your week starts, you are prepped for your entire week. That's one of the songs that you'll sing a lot, and the kids love this. They'll request this song too. We have Old MacDonald. There's his farm and different animals. Then even like throughout the year, at one point, you're gonna sing Old MacDonald Had a Zoo. You're gonna want different visuals for that part. You will do bingo a lot during football, but it's not always bingo. Sometimes it will turn into Peter or Clara, depending on the story that you're reading. There's Peter. No, there was Peter and Clara and bingo. So there's the farmer and the dog named Bingo. Now, there are different ways that you can do this as well. Some people like to have their letters for bingo, and on the back, they'll have hands that are clapping, so that when you do your song, and you flip your words or your letters over, they'll know to clap their hands. This is a good way of doing it because then you're not just taking a letter away and there's an empty space. The kids are going to know how many times they need to clap their hands before they start back in saying the letters. One thing I do want to say is that whenever you are doing these songs or reciting these poems, do it slowly. So even if you think that you're going too slow, it's probably just right because they're processing the song and the words and the actions. So make sure that you go really slow. So if you think you're too slow, you're probably just right. Later on, like we said, you might change to bingo. Oh shoot, I should put these back up. Hold on, guys. We're gonna put these back up. Try to say the names of the letters as much as possible. So if I'm putting these up, I'll say B, I, N, G. I'm probably going too fast right now. Oh, for the kids. O. And then you'll sing your song. You'll flip them over. And I'll say, I'm going to flip over the B now. Everybody say goodbye, B. Everybody say goodbye to the B. And then we'll sing, we'll clap our hands for the B. And I will point to the letters each time. So we'll clap and I'll say I-N-G-O, 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 and bingo was his name. Oh, now I'm going to turn the I over. Everybody think about the I. Bye. And we'll flip it over and we'll do the whole thing. So then even at the end, when we're all done, I'll say, I'm going to take the O, I'm going to take the G, I'm going to take away the N, I'm going to take away the I, I'm going to take away the B. So you're saying the names of these letters and showing them the letters multiple times just during one song. There will be other times when you will use bingo. You'll sing it through like you normally would. And then I might say to the kids, we know that this is the letter B, and B says B. This is later on in the year, not the beginning. What if I take the letter B away and I put the letter L there instead? L says O. So I'm going to put it in the beginning of the word. Now what does it say? Window. The letter L says O, so this changed the whole word to a new word that now says lingo. And then you can keep doing that with different letters.
And they do it amazingly.
They do it. And it's awesome. And you'll be super excited when it happens. So that's bingo. These are all of my visuals for bingo, so we can do a lot. As you can see, and do lots of visuals for bingo. For Swipple, because there are so many different materials for you to use, this is what I keep mine in for the week. So everything I need for that week, I'll put in this bin, and I'll put it right in my easel. You can do it however you want to. I also, I will print off my whole week, and I'll keep that right in there with me as well. So that I know if I'm doing Unit 1, Week 1, Day 1, it tells me all of the materials that I need. Yeah, so example of materials for Unit 1, Week 1, Day 1. You'll need poetry posters, which they do have on the website. We'll show you this later tomorrow, I believe, tomorrow afternoon. We'll go over where to find everything, but you can print off a little poetry poster if you don't have one. Poems written on a small index card to recite. One set of uppercase letters, one set of children's names, flannel board, and flannel pieces. So this, I made this for the 4 of us. Normally you would have your children's names like Sarah showed you this morning. I have multiple sets of letters that I keep right in here. Oh wait, no, I have them. So I have a set of uppercase letters. I have a set of lowercase letters. Because you'll be using those a lot, but you can have numbers as well. It says numbers. That's important to have also because you'll be playing number games. But for this, one of these activities, we'll need the children's names, and then you'll need the letter that each one of their names starts with. So we're actually going to go through week 1, day 1. So I know right here that we're going to sing If You're Happy You Know It. I'm not going to sing that one because you guys all know it. We're going to play the If Your Name Starts With game. We're going to do the poem Stand Up, and then we're going to do 5 Green and Speckled Frogs. So I know that I need to have all of those prepared. You will, just like we read the stories 4 times, we're going to sing the same songs multiple times, but we're going to be doing something different each time. Just like with If You're Happy You Know It, the first time you sing it, you're just going to sing it. Or with our poem today, Stand Up, we're just reciting the poem and doing the actions, and we just do it once, and that's it. So it might seem like, why do you do that? But there's a reason behind it. And the next time that you say it, you're going to build on your poem. And then you'll do some other things as well. Okay, so we're going to start with this game. And there's a script on here as well that you can follow. So I would say to everybody, we're going to play a game with our names. And I'm going to hold up a letter like this. This is
letter. That's my name.
You're right. This is the letter M. So if your name starts with the letter M, like Melissa's name starts with the letter M, she's going to raise her hand. Like fun, Melissa. My name also starts with the letter M, so I'm going to raise my hand. So let's say that Sarah raises her hand right now too. So then I would say to Sarah, Sarah, I can see you're raising your hand. Your name starts with the letter S. This is Sarah, and your name starts with the letter S. Your turn is coming up. Everybody is going to get a turn today. So good job paying attention, Sarah. But we stay positive, and we make sure that everybody knows they're going to get a turn before this time. And then, so like I said, you're going to have kids that are going to raise their hands. That's okay. Make sure that you have their name available so that you can say, this isn't a match. Sarah's name starts with the letter S. Remember, you're saying the names of these letters as much as you can and showing her that. So then, I'm going to, don't raise your hand. If your name begins with the letter J, raise your hand. And then I would say, Jessie, look, your name begins with the letter J. This is when you raise your hand. And then she raises her hand. So there are multiple opportunities there to practice that skill. All right, so once you play that game, next we are going to learn a poem called Stand Up. So this is when you can, if you have a poster, you can put it up. If you don't have one, you can print it off. Sometimes the focus isn't, even what's on the poster. Sometimes the focus is to really work on reciting or doing motions. So for this one, you can have it written on a little piece of paper in front of you if you don't remember it. I a lot of times won't remember the exact words, so I like to have mine in front of me. The reason you want it in front of you is because you want the kids to see you reciting the poem and doing the motions. You don't want to be turned around and reading the poem from the poster during this day. On another day, you will read the poem, you'll be pointing to the words, and you'll have a different purpose for reading the poem that day. This time, we're just going to recite the poem. So you can do the motions with me.
Here you go, Carla.
Ready? All right, so the title of the poem is Stand Up. Stand up. Turn around. Clap to 4. Clap once more. Take a bow. Stomp your foot. Stop right now. Wave your hand. Bend 2 knees. Sit back down. Look at me. thing we're doing, because especially at the beginning of the year, it's a long time down. They might be getting antsy. They also get excited for songs, so if they know what the song is. Jesse, I think that's
No, one was already
this will get them excited to stay and focus for our last song. So this, we are going to sing a song. There we go. And you know what? It's okay to look back too. And I will tell my kids, Mrs. Gallagher needs to look at something real quick. And we're teaching them fiction. So we're going to sing a song about 5 frogs that jump in, or that sit on a log by a cool blue pond. So I have my cool pond, and I have my log. And this is called 5 green and speckled frogs. And we call them speckled because they have little dots, little spots. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's count them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You want to make sure that you're counting as much as possible and that you're going as slow as possible again. And I like to eat bugs. I have some bugs. All right. We're going to sing the song, and each time a frog jumps into the pond, we're going to move 1 frog down. So let's sing the song together. Are you ready?
Yeah, I would say your swivel stuff's really nice.
I'm writing that. She usually prints 2 if you want me.
Yeah, sharing is caring. So if you're prepping, you can always just print 2 or for however many teachers you have. All right, so we're going to start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frogs. All right. 5 green and speckled frogs sat on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. 1 jumped into the pool, where it was nice and cool. Now there are 4 green speckled frogs. So I'm going to move him down here. I'm not going to take him off. I'm going to leave him here so that they can see that he's no longer on the pond or on the log. We had 5. We took 1 away. Now there are, count with me, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have 4 frogs. 4 green and speckled frogs sat on a speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. 1 jumped into the pool, where it was nice and cool. Now there are 3 green speckled frogs. The kids love you. All right, so we had 5. 2 of them jumped into the pool. I see 1, 2 down here. We have 1, 2, 3 frogs left. All right, 3 green and speckled frogs. A speckled log, eating some most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. 1 jumped into the pool, where it was nice and cool. Now there are 2 green speckled frogs. I'm going to move him down, and I have 1, 2 frogs left. Should we sing the rest, or do you guys? Got it, okay. So you have lots of opportunities there to go over counting. You can see you're doing a little subtraction, even though they don't know it, where you're taking the frogs away, so they know that we had 5, we took 3 away, now we have 2 left. You can talk more about that towards the end of the year. But like I said, this is day 1, so you're just going to really sing the song, and you'll get into it more later. So those are the only activities that you're going to do for the first day. You are going to have a lot of different songs, a lot of different poems, some different math activities throughout the year. But like I said, this is probably one of the biggest times that you're gonna have.
And definitely at the outset, like, you don't use that with your forever.
Yeah.
The first year, it is a lot of work, but it gets easier.
Any questions? Nicole?
So what if you're not familiar with the song? Is there a CD?
Oh, that's a good question. There is not a CD. I actually did a lot of searching on YouTube to find stuff. The website has a lot more stuff now than it did the first year when we just had our booklets. So there are actually some visuals on the website as well. But like I said, tomorrow I think we're going to go through and show everybody that. So there are some visuals you can use. You can go find your own visuals. There, I believe it tells you sometimes where, or are there YouTube links for songs? No,
I don't think so.
but you can definitely search up songs or use your teacher friends to ask them to. Like I know a lot of people we would email like, hey guys, what? Yeah, do you know this? What is it? And either somebody already knew it or somebody found a link and they would send it to everybody else. So
Would you use that audio recording with
No.
the kids?
I would learn it myself and then I would sing it to them. And actually, yeah, I've done that a few times where I've had to look up a song that I did not know at all and learn it and then sing it.
Why?
Nicole.
You're doing great. You've got them all answered.
I know, but why, guys?
So you can sing slow.
Yes. Typically recordings are very fast.
And you can emphasize the sound and say in the
Yes.
rhyme, with the rhyming song,
And count before multiple times.
Right.
Yeah.
Focus more on.
Right, so recording, I'm just gonna reiterate what they said. The recordings are typically very fast and it's just audio. There's no, unless if you're singing or mouthing it along, there's no real enunciation of how those words are being formed, like the visual part of that too. So yeah, so learning the song and singing it with the kids, you sort of just need to swallow your pride if you're not confident in doing that. It's just you and a bunch of 4-year-olds. You can do it, and just go, like you were saying, spot on, go slow. If it feels too slow, it's probably just right. And then you can really enunciate your words. You can really like stop and pause on those words that you want to show rhyme or definition and movement, things like that.
I will say too that for when we were doing remote learning, and I don't know if that's going to be something that people are going to be doing, but I was teaching from my house, so I did not have this at my house, so I made my own little felt board that I used. These are really big, but I would get whatever. I had some smaller visuals that I could use on here. I had all of the kids' names with me as well, and if I needed them to have their own letter of the first letter of their name, I would let the parents know in advance, and I would say if you could have them, or like their homework would be write the letter J on a piece of paper so you can hold it up tomorrow, so that they would have what they needed. Or if they needed a set of numbers, I would tell them that you can write like the numbers 1, 2, and 3, or make sure that the parents had that available for the kids so that they can do that.
I feel like Swiffle was one of the easiest things to transfer to remote learning, because you can still sing the songs in a Zoom meeting, you can still read the poems in a Zoom meeting, you can even do recordings of the poems.
Yes.
So I felt like that was an easy transition from in-school to off-site.
Any questions?
Oh, there's a question.
The question is, I know we'll talk later about this, but how do we do this with masks on?
Well, so you can still sing the songs and recite the poems and do the motions to the songs.
So we were, yeah, and we were talking about this during the break too, and had some good ideas come up. One of them is, again, and you know, in pre-K, the distancing is going to be a big piece of how we instruct, I think, moving into the new school year. So if there's any way that you can keep that distance between you and the first row of children, then you may be able to get away better without having to wear a mask for this part. Any part of this curriculum, I would argue, quickly on the spot, can be done and done well outdoors. So taking Swipple outside could be an option, or you had a really good idea of possibly pre-recording yourself if it's not an option to take your mask off. If you can record yourself singing it and then play it for the students while you're during Swipple, right? Say, I recorded this yesterday when I was alone in the classroom without my mask on, so it was safe to do so. Now we're gonna sing it, so then at least there's some type of a visual aid. Some of the masks have clear coverings. We weren't sure if that like fogged up or anything though, so I'm not necessarily recommending those. I just know that that was an
I
option.
had ordered a face shield so that I could take my mask off, but then I don't think that's going to be allowed. Yeah.
I've heard that you can put anti-bug spray on those masks so that they don't bug up.
Anti-bug spray?
Fog spray.
Fog
The only
spray.
Anti-fog spray.
about
Okay.
that, though, is you're gonna have to continue to do it or it gets cloudy. So that silicone, that the anti-fog, somebody was just cautioning me, like, it's been a little windshield and that close to your face, so.
Right.
It will become to like, because some people are using it on their glasses
Yeah.
and you have to keep doing it or they're going to become blurry after a while, so.
Right.
I would just caution.
Yeah.
That's
So
a little bit.
recording yourself so you have a visual is probably a really good bet.
We're outdoors.
I think somebody said something about recording it and having it available in the technology center to look at, or maybe
Yeah.
library and listening, so they can put the iPad.
And if you have any other brave adults in your school, like your principal or your custodian or bus driver that would be willing to sing this and be recorded, like that could be a fun way to incorporate. Again, maybe not on week one, day one, because they're still trying to get to know you. But as an option, and depending on how long it goes in, I thought that was a great recommendation.
I have a few more comments that are coming in, or questions. The next one was, do we need to do the Swipple all at the same time, or can you break it up throughout the day?
That is a good question.
No.
Okay.
So Morgan prints hers out and has hers here. I write mine up on my board because there's going to be times when it's a transition or you need a quick song and I'm pulling from the Swipple songs that I know we're going to sing that day. There are some days where you only have 2 or 3 things to do in Swipple, but there are some days when there's 5 or 6 and there's so much and you're doing a math book as well. And so working those in throughout the day is not a bad thing. You don't have to do them all at once. You can if you want. It really depends on your group.
That's the other thing too, is that, like you said, some days there are a lot of different things to do in football and you're not going to be able to do it all. Read your class, even sometimes they're not in it, like a little early, and that's okay. There are 4 weeks each unit. There is always a 5th week built in. So that 5th week is really time for you to put anything into it that you didn't get to that you really want to. So if there's something in Swipple that you didn't get to do what you want to, write that down for your 5th week so that you can do that then as well if you don't get to it another time.
And if I find that's happening, I always do the literacy activity. And no matter what it is, I'm doing literacy every day. Something that kindergarten noticed when our kids moved on to them was they had a hard time separating the letter name and the letter sound. So when you're introducing those letters or saying them, either focus on the name or focus on the sound. So they moved on to kindergarten and they were reading words and like, he says book. But then they couldn't separate the 2 things, like he says book. And they're right, he does say book, but I didn't want them to say book. And if it doesn't specify uppercase or lowercase in the lessons, make sure that you are aware of incorporating both of those throughout the school year so that when they go into kindergarten, they've been introduced to both. Great job.
I do have one more question. I mean, I don't, the chat room does. Is there a way to integrate this in with a phonics program such as Jolly Phonics? This is from Kate, which she's being asked to incorporate as well.
Yeah, so if you're supplementing with a specific curriculum, whether it's a math curriculum or a phonics curriculum, then use that curriculum in lieu of this, right? So like I wouldn't, if you're focused on teaching phonological awareness and Jolly Phonics is that curriculum for you, do what it says in Jolly Phonics. Don't worry so much about this piece. In fact, I might even take Swipple out of my schedule and do Jolly Phonics during that. Like Morgan said. What? Oh, sorry. But there are parts of Swipple that are really enjoyable, not just for the teacher, but the kids love it. Like she was showing us Bingo, Five Green and Speckled Frogs, Old MacDonald. These are classic songs that we remember, right? We knew and loved, that have a really strong purpose in a preschool classroom. It's not just that it's a cutesy song with fun visuals. There's a point and a purpose to teaching those songs and the rhyme and the alliteration that goes along with them. So there is a place and a time that you could still be doing those. But if your district is supplementing in building blocks for math or Jolly Phonics for phonics, do those to fidelity as well.
That's one of the biggest, I got a lot of feedback my first year from parents saying, my kid is coming home and they're singing so many songs. And there are some songs that the child hadn't learned before, so they're learning them at school, and then the parents are so excited to hear them singing their songs and expressing what they've learned at school at home. Right.
Bingo is the only song where I had one kid last year go, again.
Yeah. Because we really, the other piece to that conversation is the alignment, the vertical alignment between pre-K to K. So if kindergarten classrooms are using Jolly Phonics and pre-K decides that they want to do that for that alignment piece, then that's so important, right? It's not something that you can just flub or pick and choose what you want to do. However, if your kindergarten program is not following K for Me or Focus on K2, or if they have a handful of other curricula that they're doing, then and your district is saying, let's do Jolly Phonics, I would highly encourage you be the advocate in your classroom to say, who else is doing Jolly Phonics and why should that only be me? Because that's a curriculum that does span the grades. So if it's only going to be taught in pre-K and nowhere else, then I would argue, let's just stick to what the curriculum tells me to do within Swipple and Swiplin, instead of doing something that's not going to be carried on. But if K is doing Jolly Phonics and the district is considering putting it into pre-K, then yes. Yes.
Although I think I would still write the songs and stuff up on my board, because there are those times in the day where you need something quick and you can't think of it.
Especially if after centers, if it's time to clean up for centers and some kids are all done cleaning up and some are taking a long time, you're going to have them start coming back to your group area or wherever they're supposed to be.
And you want to engage.
Yes, that's important to know too, is that you'll want one adult to be sitting in your group where your kids are coming to do the next activity, and then your other adult in the room is going to be helping the kids finish cleaning up or doing whatever task they're doing. You're going to want to keep them engaged, so this could be a time where you could fill in with songs or activities that you didn't get to do for Swiplin, or if you're not doing them for another person.
Are there any other questions, Marcy?
That's all I have.
Thank you. So I think as far as curriculum components, we got through a lot today. We got through one. Intro to centers, thinking and feedback, read aloud, storytelling, story acting, songs, word play, and letters. And if you're not freaking out yet, great. Typically right around this time is when we start getting the question, I'm a half-day program. How on earth am I going to fit in everything we discussed today? Or I'm a full-day program, and we still have specials or this or that, what have you. So tomorrow there's a time in the schedule for us to dig in a little deeper into the meat of that and what a schedule might look like in a half-day or in a full-day program. So Maine is so diverse this way. We have programs that operate half-day 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, right? We have programs that operate full day 5 days, full day 2 days. It's all over the map. And the curriculum can be done in any of those scenarios, but it never looks the same. So one piece of advice, if you walk away with nothing else, just remind yourself this, to just be kind to yourself if this is your first year implementing it. Don't expect perfection ever, especially with whatever's happening this year as far as COVID and distancing and masks and all that. It's gonna be imperfect, and that's okay. All you need to keep in mind is, first and foremost, the relationship with your students, and that interaction piece with your students. If you can nail those two things throughout the school year, pat yourself on the back. And then once those are well underway, you can start really focusing on, you know, like they were saying, Unit 1, Week 1, Day 1. This is not August 26th, Monday at 8 a.m., right? This is probably October 2nd, maybe September 28th. I don't know if even those are weekdays, but it's later in the, you know, we let the kids come, let them get acclimated to the school, acclimated to the routine, acclimated to the bus, pick up, drop off, the teacher, my peers. There's so much that they need to take in. Unit 1, Week 1, Day 1 is not the first day of school. Okay? So we'll, you know, sort of chat about that and answer some questions about that as we go on. The other big thing too is that you can see in this room and by the participants on Zoom, there's what, over 70. You're not alone in this. Everybody's starting this, or many of you are starting this for the first time. And so you have each other, you have us, the department, and most importantly, you have the 4 of them who are more than willing to have you come and visit, chat with you, email with you. So there was a lot today, there's more tomorrow, and we'll get through it. You guys be great. Is there any other big questions that you just can't leave without having some type of inkling into?